Hello and welcome to another episode of Celiac Straight Talk, the podcast where we come together for a cure. I'm Claire Baker, Senior Communications Director at Beyond Celiac, a nonprofit dedicated to fostering greater understanding and awareness and accelerating research for treatments and a cure for celiac disease, a serious genetic autoimmune disease. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and don't forget to like and share our podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Celiac Straight Talk. My name is Leah Popovic. I'm the podcast coordinator here with Beyond Celiac. And for today's episode, I'm super excited to have two of our ambassadors here. And we're going to be having a little bit of a conversation of what it's like to be a patient with celiac disease while also being an athlete or involved in athletics in some sort of way. So my first ambassador I'm going to hand it off to is Hayden.
Thanks, Leah. Hi, I'm Hayden Bishop. I have been an ambassador with Beyond Celiac for around 3 years now, and I've had celiac disease, or rather been diagnosed with celiac disease for about 5 years now. When I was diagnosed with celiac disease, I was a professional athlete in terms of how many hours I spent training in a variety of martial arts. I was training to do stunts and also competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Awesome. And then Alyssa, we'll hand it over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa McGee. I've had celiac disease for 14 years now, and I've been involved with Beyond Celiac, I believe, since the fall of 2021. And I kind of did sports all throughout being diagnosed, but especially during high school, I was involved in cheerleading, and then I was on competitive dance team, so I traveled a lot with celiac disease.
So I'm Leah. I've had celiac for 2 years, diagnosed for 2 years. I've had symptoms all my life, and I was also an athlete all throughout high school before being diagnosed. So I think we have an array of things that we'll be able to talk about. My sport was mainly basketball, but Alyssa, being diagnosed 14 years ago, you've lived with the diagnosis for the majority of your life. When did you start to notice that being an athlete with celiac disease might make it a little bit harder, or at least a little bit different than an athlete who might not have an autoimmune disease?
I would say I definitely noticed it like freshman year of high school when I started competing for dance, because like I said, you're on the road a lot, you're with your team all throughout the day, and just like especially just like eating out in general was really difficult. And I remember doing a lot of research for the places that we were going before, and just like not feeling, when I had symptoms and everything, like I felt like I just had to push them aside and really focus on what I had to do that day, because it did affect me in that moment. Like if I wasn't feeling well, I'm like, well, I just have to push that aside and I have to focus on what I'm doing right now. So I think that definitely was when it kind of hit me, like, wow, this is really different than just living, like day by day with having celiac disease.
Mm-hmm. And then Hayden, tell me a little bit about the cardio side of jiu-jitsu, because I'm not really familiar with that, but I'm sure it's a lot of work and probably very taxing on your body.
It definitely is. I mean, jiu-jitsu is ground grappling with some judo, so some throws to get to the ground as well. And then Muay Thai is stand-up. So essentially MMA, combat sports, it's very, very hard on your body. I had symptoms scattered throughout my childhood of celiac, but I always thought I was just fine. It was normal. And I didn't really have daily symptoms. When I started to compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I started to get a rash, and I thought it might be related to training, sweating and being in sweaty clothes a lot. And then when I was diagnosed with celiac disease, I actually started getting a lot more symptoms, and it drastically changed the way that I was able to show up for training and just be able to put in the work to even get to a competition level. And I had a really hard time accepting it. So it led at first to more injuries. I ended up having to get hip surgery because when I first was diagnosed, I thought it's fine. I can do this. I don't need to change anything. I'm eating gluten-free. Like, I can still do my life the same as I was doing before. And I kept pushing myself, and my body wasn't recovering the same with this autoimmune disease as it was before. And my my ligament just completely snapped open. My labrum tore off, and then, I had to really take a long, hard look at accepting that my body is different now and it can't show up the same way as it did before.
Definitely. That's something for me when I was, since I was undiagnosed until I got into college. So I remember being a little kid and just feeling like I wasn't as quick as everyone else. I feeling lethargic all the time, even when it didn't come to sports. Just being very fatigued. I had anemia, which was, a symptom, but they didn't process it as a symptom of celiac, and so I kind of tried to chalk it up to that. And then it was once I started getting really, really serious into sports, like playing for leagues and that kind of stuff, where it started to hit me of like, is my body different, or am I just like weaker than the rest of these people? And so it was definitely a very confusing time for me. I quit sports midway through high school because I felt defeated. I was always injured. I was always just so fatigued. We would like run sprints at basketball practice, and I was always the last one to finish, even though like I felt confident in the way I played my game. Like I couldn't run, and I don't know, it was just, it wasn't the same level of intensity as everyone else. So looking back, that is a telltale sign of being an athlete with celiac. I'd also like to ask you guys, I know, Hayden, you touched on this a little bit, but when did your mind have to start making that transition into, okay, I do need to treat my body a little bit differently? And what were some of the things that you guys did?
I'm really stubborn. And I think I'm constantly still trying to accept that my body is different. And it's like a daily thing. I mean, some days it seems easier than others. And then some days I feel like I could just cry thinking about how I remember how I used to be, and looking and listening to how other people, even just work out. It's really hard to accept that your body, that you just don't know what's going to happen with your body, that it just doesn't show up consistently. When you are an athlete, you train and you expect your body to show up consistently when you go through certain routines. And then when you have an autoimmune disease, you just never know what symptom's going to come, when it's going to come, what it's going to be triggered by. And a lot of times for me, when I really started to notice a change in my body in regards to sports was when I started to get migraines after being diagnosed with celiac. And when you have that kind of pain, you can't ignore it. And when going to train and then your body and your muscles get tight, and then it just adds to that, it becomes very debilitating, where you can't move and you can't even function to work to make money to live. And that is just like a hard slap in the face, where you have to reevaluate and go, how am I going to show up differently now that my body is showing up differently?
Okay. So when Leah, you brought up the whole basketball thing, that kind of brought me back to when I was like really little and I was first diagnosed. I had really bad symptoms in like second grade, and I was diagnosed in third. I used to play basketball until up to like sixth grade ish. But again, I was the shortest kid on the team. They would like used to make fun of me. They're like, oh, she could never make a shot for her life. And I was like, oh, like I'm just super bad at basketball. Like I accepted that. But and like they were like, oh, you need to work hard and do all these things. And I got diagnosed a short time after, and they were like, well, I had osteopenia. my bones were just not like where they were supposed to be. I had like all these like vitamin deficiencies. I was not growing, not gaining weight. And like looking back now, I'm like, I look in that situation so much differently. Even in that moment, I was like, I could do better. I could be better. Like everyone around me was just growing and, becoming better at basketball. And I was just still in the same spot for so many years. So I guess that's not what we were discussing at that time. That just kind of brought me back to that. And I was like, looking back, I struggled a lot. Even now, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, like it was not a good time for me. So
no, I can completely relate. I remember being like made fun of on the middle school soccer team because when I was very young, I made the conscious decision to be a goalkeeper so that I didn't have to run as much as anyone else. Not only because of my celiac, but because I'm not a big fan of running. But I remember in middle school, we would still have to run sprints and stuff, and I would come in last, and I would get made fun of. And I had a really big injury when I was just about to go into high school. I broke my kneecap, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for me, where I started feeling like I'm incapable of being an athlete. And for me, it was like, I don't know why. I don't know how to change this. Now that I'm diagnosed and I'm not involved with organized sports as much anymore, it's good to know how to give your body some grace and how to treat your body correctly and recover correctly, especially because you don't want to miss out on these things in life, even if it's just, playing volleyball in the front yard with your family, something like that. Playing at the beach, throwing the football at the beach. You don't want to miss out on these things and have to pay physically for it. And so to kind of shift a little bit towards that side of things, let's talk nutrition. Let's talk, what did you guys find to be the best ways to fuel yourself while maintaining the gluten-free diet, while also being an athlete, while also spending all of this energy and time doing something that you love, but ultimately paying a price for it?
I think for me, there was a really big shift in mindset. Because before I had an autoimmune disease, I ate really healthy, I meal prepped, and I kind of had this idea that what's healthy for one person is healthy for everyone. And, the kind of idea that eat your fruits and vegetables and make sure you work out for 30 minutes 3 times a week, or whatever the saying is, that everyone can do and feel great. And then going through celiac disease and having symptoms and that plan not working for my body, I started to shift into this thinking of what works for one person is completely different that works for someone else. What makes me feel good might make someone else feel crappy. And trying to give myself grace in going, this is what's good for me, and this is what makes me feel good, and that's what I'm going to do. And honestly, for me, that's pretty much eating potatoes almost every meal. Potatoes, and I eat more sugar too. And I know a lot of people think sugar is so bad for you. Sugar is so bad. But sometimes my body is running so low on energy and it gets so bloated or nauseous if I eat something with fiber. So something that's like a salad or something that's healthy. So all I can eat is like some chocolate and some potato chips. And that makes me feel better and able to do whatever I need to do. And I think that's the only way you really can do it. Just try to see like what your body's telling you and really listen to your body instead of listening to whatever fad or whatever science is saying is good for people right now.
Hayden, I completely agree with you. Obviously I probably had a little bit of a different experience, with being diagnosed so young. My parents did everything for me. They were like, we're just going to handle it. And then when I went to high school, I was not very smart in high school, and I kind of just didn't care sometimes what I ate. And I definitely felt all the symptoms of celiac disease. Being bloated was just the worst possible symptom I had. I remember days where we had dance competitions and I was like having stomach pains. I was bloated. I was just miserable the entire day. And, traveling, I would have just a bag of potato chips or something. That's all I would eat the entire day. Or everyone would go out to eat, and I would try to have okay, I'll try to eat safely while going out, and obviously that's not a guarantee half the time. So I would say I'm definitely getting better now, but became a vegetarian sophomore year of high school, so I definitely made it harder on myself. And I was lactose intolerant, being diagnosed so young into high school too. So I feel like nutrition is something I'm still working on, even to this day, even though I'm not an athlete. But when I was definitely in high school, I should have done better, and I should have planned my meals out better. But I mean, looking back, I was just a kid. But I remember eating just a bag of candy, and I was okay, that's fine. But obviously, that was not fine. Looking back.
When I look back to childhood sports, one thing that pops out to me is this pasta party type thing that teams would do. I don't know if that was just a thing in my area, but it was always either the whole team would get together and eat pasta, or your coach would say make sure you have spaghetti and meatballs tonight for dinner. And so that's what I did. And so I just remember waking up the next day on a game day being so bloated, feeling terrible, absolutely terrible, but thinking, oh, this is what I'm supposed to feel I'm supposed to feel like this so that I work it all off, on the court. That was not the case. And I also, Hayden and Alyssa, I agree on the sugar aspect, where I would eat Mike and Ike's on the sideline, when I wasn't playing. That sugar rush is what would really make me play my best games, and I didn't know any better. I don't know. And so then comes the self-doubt of kind of blaming yourself, I'm not eating healthy, and I'm not like the other kids. Why am I not like the other kids? And so, I think it's really interesting that that's kind of a common thread that we all have. Are there any big moments in your athletic career where celiac disease just took such a big toll that, you'll never forget that day?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the day I remember so vividly. I was in a Krav Maga class, and at this time in my life, I was probably spending 30 hours a week in a gym training some sort of martial art, and I was throwing a punch. It was, I was warmed up, everything felt fine, and there was a audible crack and snap in my hip, and I remember thinking in that moment that for the couple of months prior, this was probably within 5 months of being diagnosed as celiac, I felt I felt my mind trying to ignore the fact that I felt that my body wasn't recovering in the same as it was before. And I just kept trying to ignore it. I just kept thinking, mind over matter, if I just keep pushing myself and just keep going, it's going to be fine. It's always been fine up until this point. And when it snapped, I literally waited about 3 months before I went to see a doctor, because I just was hoping that it was going to heal on its own. And I remember I saw a chiropractor who was a sports specialist, and he told me, oh, do this with your leg. And he asked where the pain was. And then he said, it's probably a labrum tear, and you're going to have surgery, and it's going to be at least 6 months on crutches. And I just remember going to my car and just crying for so long, just the realization of it all hitting me at once, my body is never going to be the same again. And I could not walk and drive for almost a year. I was in PT for 8 months, and I'm back to, I coach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now, but I constantly have to modify what I'm doing. And ever since that moment, I just always think back to the moment where the labrum just snapped, because it was kind of a slap in the face. As much as we want as humans to control like our lives, and we do these things, like you said, we eat these certain things to feel good and be healthy and live longer lives. The reality of it is that sometimes our decisions don't actually reflect on how our lives go. Sometimes it's just chaos, and even if we do the right things, we still feel sick and our bodies are still broken. And if we don't accept that, it's going to be more suffering. There's going to be more suffering on top of the suffering that already is by not accepting that your body just doesn't work the same as someone without an autoimmune disease.
Yeah, Hayden, going off of that, I don't know if this is a horror story, but this is just like a really funny, like, I don't even know what kind of story this is. It was like when I was like super young though, and I just thought about this with the whole basketball thing, just going on all of those, like all those memories. We were like doing free throw shots, and we all like lined up. We had to go one by one, and all the coaches, everyone was surrounding us, and I was the only one who couldn't make one. I was again like shortest kid on the team, like yeah, always one who couldn't make one. And I think I was diagnosed with celiac disease at the time. They're you need to eat more Wheaties, and that was the joke for the entire season. You need to eat more Wheaties. And I don't know why that stuck. And like, looking back, I'm like, that stuck with me for so many years. But literally, I could never make a shot. Like, never could make a shot. That's why I probably never played really much. And they always said, like, the joke the entire, even like a couple of years after that, like, I would still have the Wheaties joke brought up to me, even though I was diagnosed with celiac disease. Like, I don't know why that just popped. That's again not a horror story. Like, Hayden, so sorry you had to go through that. That sounds terrible. But like, I mean, just something like that happened when I was like 3rd and 4th grade, and it's been with me till now. So
I think that reminds me, Alyssa, that I feel like even since that and recovering from the hip injury and coming back into training some myself, one of the hardest parts is like other people's perceptions, because I'm an adult and I can go to the gym, and then in jiu-jitsu we call black belts professors. So I'll be training and a professor is teaching the class, and then they'll make a comment to me like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. You only train like once a week. That's not going to be good enough to like learn. And just these comments, and it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough, or people are looking at me like I'm lazy or I'm weak. And inside, I'm just screaming like, I don't want to be this way. Like, it's not my mind. It's literally my body. And I have heard more than once from different people teaching different types of like strength and conditioning and different types of classes, like, oh, humans, it's the mind that's weak and the body will just keep going. And I always think in my head, okay, for a lot of people, I get that. It's them, their minds wanting to quit. But for a lot of other people, it's not our minds, it's our bodies that are literally going to break if we push ourselves. And it's just, I don't know if I'll ever get over that, because it's the way that people perceive it, and it's just kind of, it's hurtful.
I think
it's only in other spaces like this with other people who also have celiac or autoimmune diseases where you actually feel seen.
And even outside of the athletic standpoint, although that's the focal point of our conversation, there's always this pressure to almost prove yourself to people, or be able to handle a certain amount of physical exertion, when in reality that's just not what our bodies are made for. I still, get comments. I'll make new friends, and I'll tell them how, like, a mile long run will tire me out. And they'll be like, oh, a mile's nothing. I go to the gym twice a day, all the time. I'm taking whey protein powder. Like, that's great for you, but that's not how it works for me. And I'm currently in the process of trying to get in the gym to gain weight, and that's one of those things that I'm worried about, is how other people perceive me in public, of like, I'm not going to be curling 35-pound dumbbells. Like, I'm probably going to need to start with an 8-pound dumbbell. Like, people aren't going to... Will people think of me as, lazy and inexperienced? Or will they just think, oh, this person is starting their own journey. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. I think the judgment is just kind of unavoidable, especially right now because celiac isn't well known. So I've even explained to people about celiac, and still that you just kind of get this washed over face of, I don't get it. Okay, you just don't eat gluten. Like, how does that affect you physically? I think it's just going to take some time. I think it's hopeful that if we look back 20 years ago, how people thought of other people with celiac versus now, there's such a big improvement that I can only hope that 10 years from now, it's going to be that much better, where you can be in a gym and someone say something to you and you go, yeah, I have celiac disease. And they can look at you with empathy.
Right. Do you guys have any words of advice that you would give to an athlete who might be struggling?
I would just say, like, take it day by day. Like, I didn't do that in the time, and I think it affected me. Like, I needed to focus on, like, that day alone and focus on, like, what practice I had, if I had a game to go to, if I had a dance competition that weekend, if I need, like, just take it day by day. And also going off the social part of it, I know it's hard, but don't listen to anyone else says about it. Like, focus on what works for you, like Hayden was going off of, like, what you put in your body, like, focus on, like, what works for you and how you do, like, the best that you can do. Like, if anyone sort of tries to, like, butt in on that conversation, be like, I have no celiac disease and I need to focus on what works best. I'm not going off what you're telling me to do.
Yeah, I like that. Stand your ground and be true to yourself. I also would say that when I was diagnosed, I think it hit me harder because I found my identity within sports, and I felt like that was such a part of who I am. And it felt like celiac disease was taking that away from me. And I think my advice to other people who might feel that way is that you're more than what you do. You're more than just your body. And the most important thing is to be happy. And to be happy, you have to feel good. And sometimes life throws crap at you, and when you get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and if you're an athlete, just like Alyssa said, you have to take it day by day and just roll with the change.
Thank you so much, Hayden and Alyssa, for being here and for being a part of the Beyond Celiac community.
Thanks again for listening to Celiac Straight Talk. To learn more about life with celiac disease, visit our website at beyondceliac.org.